As I was thinking, and now as I was thinking about the next introduction, about our keynote speaker, Dr. Gary Nabhan, I really experienced a serious overload of information. I have known Gary and his family for nearly 35 years, and I know it's customary to list all the accomplishments the speaker has achieved over those years, but I didn't have time to do that either. So I decided to maybe fill you in on some of the accomplishments that will not be written in a program, to show you really what a fascinating and interesting character Gary Nabhan really is, and why he fits into this family of seed savers so well. Kent and I first met Gary in 1980. He had purchased a bus ticket from Tucson, Arizona to Bethany, Missouri, arriving at the bowling alley, which was the bus station, about 35 miles from our homestead. Kent picked him up, and I was a little nervous because we were living in an unfinished house that we were building. But as soon as I got used to his quick-witted humor, we all had a delightful time. And we shared many conversations, including one about the possibilities of forming a nonprofit organization devoted to Native American plants. We met again in 1981 at Seed Bank serving people in Tucson. There we met other people who I'm so happy that I have met in my life, John Withy, who is a bean collector, Carl Barnes, Carrie Fowler. And I think at that time we all formed a friendship and enthusiasm and a common goal for preserving plant diversity. I could talk a little bit about, those are all the serious times we have, but I do want to share a few little interesting other times we had with Gary, like the time we played hooky from the 1985 Seed Conference at the Missouri Botanical Garden. We were laughing, and we purchased cardboard duck bills, putting them on and joining a group of folks doing the duck walk at Union Station in St. Louis. Or how about the time we met Gary at Eco Farm Conference in California? Gary was most insistent the time we got there that we had to go to the monarch butterfly sanctuary near Pacific Grove, where thousands of monarchs gather. The last night of the conference, Gary said, "Let's go." Unfortunately, it was 10 o'clock at night. He insisted you could still see the butterflies in clusters in the pines in the darkness. Even if it was only a faint movement in the moonlit trees, Gary was happy. Oh, yes, and there were bits in between. There were relaxing times when our family tubed down the upper Iowa River after the campout. There were times when we visited Gary in Tucson, and he was the wild chili eating. He had just won the wild chili eating championship, and took us and many other rental cars in the desert of Arizona looking for wild chilies. And there are times when we worried about him when he came here to the farm. He was out for a jog, and he was late returning, and we thought he was possibly in Minnesota. Or last spring, when I just saw Gary at a conference, and he had been kicked in the head with a mule, and he looked pretty rough. But I had better stop. This is beginning to sound more like a roast than an introduction, but it's all true. Seriously, Gary is the most accomplished and internationally celebrated nature writer, seed saver, conservation biologist, and agricultural activist who has been called the father of the local slow food movement by Mother Earth News. He has served on SSE's board. Gary and Karen Reichart co-founded Native Seed Search, a fellow nonprofit conservation organization. Gary was also the winner of Name the Farm contest in 1986 with his suggestion of Heritage Farm. Gary has, yes, a great idea. Gary has been a friend for the past 30 years, during which we have continued to share portions of our work and life together, many productive and challenging moments as we watched our children and organizations grow into adults. My life and those of many have been enriched with Gary's energy. It is with great pleasure and appreciation and affection to introduce Gary Paul Nabhan, one of Seed Savers Exchange's seasoned and best friends. Sorry, it had to be for me. But they really they had to know your humor.
Well, greetings, Earthlings. Diane is probably right. There's still people that are looking down on us saying, "What are those people doing down there?" And I'm glad that all of you who come back year after year are doing what you are doing. I have to say that I've spoken here off and on over the years, sometimes little workshops in the side rooms or in the tent or in the barn, and I've thanked the staff, I've thanked the board, I've thanked the founders, I've thanked the donors, and this time I want to thank the members who not only have offered me so much friendship over the years, but offered friendship to one another, such goodwill, not just exchanging seeds, but life stories, your joys and your sorrows. And there's so many people. I look out at this group and see so many people who've inspired me through their daily work, through the ordinary work of taking care of gardens, taking care of your family, taking care of seeds. I think that matters more than anything else. You're also the only group I know of that I can talk about those really personal things, like what do you do when your 5-year-old son has stuck 8 scarlet runner beans up his nose and starts to smell really bad? And what if the other kid starts sticking other scarlet runner beans up their other orifices? How do you stop this insanity, you know? What do you do when your car cassette tape deck won't work because they've stuffed it full of corn cobs? You know, these are the occupational hazards and the family hazards of having a lot of seeds around and a lot of parents looking after plants instead of their children. The children rebel against you. Okay? So there's some of you know exactly what I mean about this stuff and know that I'm not kidding at all. These are the trials and tribulations of growing up in what John called a seedy family. These things actually do happen. But there's another reason I want to emphasize the membership today, because it's not because I'm disrespectful of what our government seed programs do, what our botanical gardens do, what the Svalbard Seed Vault does, what nonprofits, great nonprofits all across the country do. But when we say those words, seed saving, to me, that's something that has to be done with human hands, with an individual who's out in the garden at the right moment, who's paying attention to the world. Institutions can't do that. Seed saving, heirloom seeds, what does that word heirloom mean? It means something passed hand to hand. That's what the Seed Savers Exchange logo is about. Institutions do not save seeds. Humans with hearts do. And so I want to congratulate you all on doing that most vital work that keeps our species and other species alive. So thank you for that. So there are people with incredible scientific skills, with legal skills, with sociological skills, with historical and folklore skills that contribute to the seed movement. But let's bring this back to the core base of what it takes to be a seed saver. Gardeners and farmers and chefs and cooks and people sitting around at night, rubbing things between their hands into colanders or bags or baskets, and doing something that people have been doing for 10,000 years. And when I hear someone like Jack Kloppenberg give that wonderfully hopeful talk this morning, or Jeremy talking, or Sarah talking about other initiatives around the world, what that work reminds me of is what we're trying to do is defend the right to have options for where our seed comes from in the future, and to maintain a tradition that's been going on for 10,000 years and hope that it goes on for another 10,000 years. And that's why coming back to your own human hands, look at your hands right now. That's what saves seeds. That's what saves seeds. I want to say that because seeds are also living and dynamic and changing their lives just like our lives are changing. I think when I listen to Diane say a beautiful introduction like that, I think about how much our our kids have changed. I've just seen her beautiful daughter that I've been seeing since she was a little kid. All our kids and all Diane's kids sleeping on the floor together in the living room while all the adult speakers took all their beds from the house, so the kids were on the floor again. And I just think they're evolving. We see their great maturity and their liveliness and their contributions. And the seeds are evolving too. The heirloom seed movement is not about preservation in the old sense of keeping things static as museum pieces. And that's why I was so heartened that several speakers today talked about keeping the seeds dynamic, of doing selection, recurrent selection, something that some seed companies have given up on. They just sell you the seeds in whatever condition they were, saying, well, let's hope it was the same seed as what Landreth had in 1840 or whatever, one of the first U.S. seed companies. We're living in a world where the climate is changing, where the cultural conditions are changing, where the economy is changing, and those seeds are evolving and changing with us in response to human needs, in response to a changing climate. And I feel this more and more, that the seed movement isn't about something retro of preserving the past, but something proactive about allowing us to have a future where people will feel nourished and we won't abuse the land or the biodiversity of this planet in feeding ourselves. We'll be in lockstep, evolving and changing as seeds and people always have. So it's odd, because a lot of people who aren't as engaged in this activity as you are think that heirloom seeds is something retro, that it's also about simply saving genes or nucleotides or chromosomes or traits or varieties or species, just like some people think wild lands conservation is about saving pandas, whales, and zebras. And it's much more dynamic than that, and it's also much more linked to our own cultures and hearts and heads and minds and communities than simply giving money to an organization to preserve pandas will ever be, because this isn't about just saving the calories or the Brix levels in a particular food. This is about the stories that link us together as a community, the stories embedded in every one of those seeds. These are our loved ones. These are our nourishment. These are the beauty in this world, as I was reminded when I woke up and saw David Cavaniero's glorious garden that's about as close to paradise as any little patch of land in Iowa could be. These are about the fragrances and flavors and feelings and reminders of joy in this world. When I see that incredible garden down the road here, or David's garden, or many of your other gardens, this is the best of what it is to be alive. This is being bombarded with such incredible beauty when we're dealing with these seeds and plants, that I don't want to give it up, and I don't want to see it go to the dogs or the Monsantos or the Dows or the Bayers. I want this to be something that every kid grows up experiencing. I was just in this wonderful situation a week ago with a guy, Andrew Mushida, that was one of the authors of a book called Biopiracy of Biodiversity. And he's a guy that was actually worked on farms in Iowa when he was younger, when he was an ag student. He's from Zimbabwe, and went back, and at age 26 or 28 years old, I think he was in some of these Keystone Dialogue discussions about the future of genetic resources that maybe Jeremy or Jack Kloppenberg or some other people in this room were involved in. He helped write the international undertaking. And he just reminded me so clearly, people in Africa would never talk about seed saving as preservation, as if we're trying to keep something that's come from the past static. That the on-farm selection that Jack Kloppenberg talked about, that we have to keep evolving, that we have to remind people it's not just getting a seed packet in the mail and no longer interacting with it after you put those seeds in the ground, that part of the participatory dance is dancing with the seeds and seeing which are best adapted to our climate, which need a different kind of soil, which have some variation in them and that we select for different uses. That active engagement with the seeds, not that we simply buy the seeds once and never interact the same way that people in the past have worked to help those seeds evolve as we're evolving our own ideas about gardening. That's what Andrew said. He said, we would never talk about this as historic preservation. This is our future. This is what we commit each day we go out into a farm or garden to our future. So the weird thing about that is, well, many of you have that feeling in your hearts, and that's what you do each day when you garden or farm. We're in this weird time warp in American history right now. This year, we are facing the largest shortage, commercial and otherwise, of seeds in American history. That includes both wild seeds and domestic seeds. The price of some seeds, forage grasses and legumes used both for reclamation and pastures, have increased fivefold over this last year in the United States and Canada. And why might that be? We've had hundreds of thousands of acres ravaged by wildfires from Texas to Idaho over the last 3 years. Hundreds of thousands of acres scraped clean, scoured clean by the floods associated with Hurricane Sandy and other superstorms. We've had a drought that has hit half the American counties last year. Half of all counties. The year before, Obama declared the greatest number of drought disaster areas in American history. 500 counties in 2011 were declared drought disaster areas because of crop failures or diminished yields. And that was an all-time record breaker, 500 counties. And some people said, well, he did that for political purposes to make it look like the government cared for those farmers. The following year, we had 1,500 counties declared drought disaster areas and 2,200 counties declared climatic catastrophe disaster areas because of wildfires, Hurricane Sandy, and all of that. If you accumulate all of that, last year, at least 3/5 and clearly half of the entire farmland of the United States was hit by some kind of climatic disruption, what a lot of people are calling the new normal. And to some extent, I don't like that word because it trivializes what we're going through. The gardening and farming conditions that we're facing now are unlike what many of us have experienced. And it's not just warming. I have a editorial in New York Times Monday about this heat wave that has hit 17 states in the West, an area larger than New England, was devastated by triple-digit temperatures for over a week, 3 weeks ago. But it's not just that you're going to face warming or drying like we have in parts of the Southwest. You guys also had the wettest spring on history. We've had for the last 3 years the coldest winter temperatures that we've ever had, and I lost $3,500 of fruit trees and olive trees and agaves and prickly pears and all the other weird stuff I eat because desert plants weren't experienced to 10 below zero freezing weather for 3 days straight. So it's not just that we're getting hit by heat or cold or flood or drought, but sometimes the same place is hit by all of those in the same year. And so part of the problem from the Farm Bureau in dealing with the climate change issues is they're saying, well, is this really about global warming? No, it's not. It's about climate uncertainty. We're entering a less predictable era, not just climatically, but ecologically and even economically, than we've ever dealt with before, and we're ill-equipped to deal with it. And we have very few tricks up our sleeve that we can employ, that we can draw upon to deal with this amount of climatic uncertainty and the economic costs of it. And the new little book I've just done, Growing Food in a Hotter, Drier Land, Lessons from Desert Farmers about adapting to climate uncertainty, sort of walks people through those different strategies for dealing with it. And of course, one of those strategies is dealing with seed diversity in a dynamic way. We may need to be growing seeds or fruit trees in this area that are different than the ones that achieve their optimum growth here over the last century. We're seeing incredible studies come out all the way across the country that the grapes that now achieve their maximum or optimum quality in Napa Valley within 20 years will have to be pulled up in Napa Valley, and the best place to grow them will be Southern Oregon or Washington. The same thing, the stuff in southern Pennsylvania won't be able to make it there for past 2030. So if people are going to have viable orchards in Pennsylvania, then they need to think out 20 years of what's going to be their climate in 2030, not what is working there now. And we're losing about 15 winter chill hours a year in Arizona, where I'm trying to grow 70 different kinds of heritage fruit trees from all different niches along that winter chill climate gradient, because I can't predict what's going to work in 10 or 15 years. And so we have to think about where seed diversity is situated culturally and economically and geographically much different than we did in the past. And we also can't let the heirloom seeds that have done well in one place for centuries be lost because of the new diseases or insect pests that are coming in sometimes from hundreds, not thousands of miles away from where we've known them up until this time. So to have an heirloom seed that's perfectly adapted to this soil, but then find out that it's now vulnerable to an introduced disease or pest or microbial problem is the kind of thing that farmers are facing all over the country. And Kurt Fries, the chef in Iowa, did a year and a half of just talking to chili farmers across the country about the changes that they're experiencing. To them, climate change is not a hypothesis. It's something that they're working on problem solving every day. Now, you would think that when we have some things going on like 1.2 million cattle dying on the ranges in the southwest borderlands, or half our counties getting hit by drought, that people would say, oh yeah, we need to ramp up the backup system of insurance, not crop insurance that gives $13 billion of support to farmers for not adapting, but things that help farmers adapt. And the incredible thing is, just at the time when all of this incredible climate uncertainty is hitting us, our federal programs that deal with seed diversity are shrinking or drying up. And I want to give you some disturbing news that I've found out just within the last couple of weeks. The Soil Conservation Service Plant Materials Center that have been the backbone of trials of forage grasses and legumes and hedgerow plants and ecological restoration species, prairie restoration species for decades and decades, since the 1930s. The mainstay of how this country gets wild biodiversity back into the landscape so that farms are diverse. It's not just that they have diverse crops in them, but they're structurally diverse with hedgerows and green belts and grass pastures for livestock and all of that. The government is close to cutting out 9 of the 29 plant material centers that we have left. The major government program of government money funded for native seed collection evaluation and increase for those forage grasses, endangered species, hedgerow plants, reforestation plants, plants for ecological restoration. That money comes through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and then goes out to deserving places like Chicago Botanical Garden or the Ladybird Wildflower Center in Texas or the Denver Botanical Garden or other organizations like that, the New England Wildflower Society or Arnold Arboretum. Last week, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation eliminated its plant conservation program entirely. They're dealing with a 1950s idea of what wildlife is, which is it's the big guys, the deer and the antelope, and that they must think that those animals don't ever eat. I can't figure out how they can eliminate a plant conservation program even if they want wildlife to survive on this planet. And at the same time, we're seeing the same kind of cuts in the National Plant Germplasm System that's doing the grow out, so that we have more guys on computers in the USDA than we have taking care of plants. Of course, that's not new news to you. Most of you know that we now have more employees in the USDA than we have farmers left in this country. So that's kind of an old story. Think about the implications of that. But why I'm mentioning this is that all of you who are great with cultivated plant seeds, garden vegetables, cereal grains, herbs, medicinal or culinary, vegetables, fruits, better be thinking about what wild species, native species you want on your farmlands too, because there ain't going to be no government help for you. You're going to be on your own in finding those plants. And we've lost something like 900 privately owned nurseries in this country, as most Americans now think they can actually get decent plants and advice from a Home Depot or a Walmart garden center, where most of the clerks don't even know the English names to the plants, let alone where they're from or why they're being sold coast to coast from Florida to Alaska, the same damn plants, you know. So go into one of those things and think about that in relation to an independently owned, locally based nursery that we had all over this continent until about 30 years ago. And we've lost something like 950 independently owned nurseries in this country since 1990. It's you all that have the knowledge to take up the slack. Your knowledge of how plants grow, how to deal with seeds, how to collect seeds, whether it's wild or cultivated stuff. This responsibility is now on us. This is where Neil Hamilton's eloquent words saying that we have to practice a seed democracy come in. There's not going to be government programs or maybe even nonprofit programs to take up this large of a task. And fortunately, just when we think we're stuck in deep shit, a whole bunch of people come around with some incredible ideas and are bouncing right through that manure. And I want to say that what the most exciting thing for me this last year has been to meet through the seed school that Native Seed Search is doing around the country, this whole raft of people that are thinking out of the box about how we exchange seeds, collect them, same thing with fruit trees, and get them around. And I'm going to give you 5 little quick examples of that. Seed libraries. The first one may have been in the Hudson River Valley. Those people are collaborating with artists to do these wonderful packets. It's just this incredible program that then inspired Native Seed Search and 2 or 3 other small seed companies in Arizona to go to our public library system, 19 libraries in our county. Our county's bigger than some piddly little states in the east like Delaware and Rhode Island and maybe even Massachusetts for all I know. But the point is that now we're in those old wooden card files for library cards that they don't need anymore because they have computers for all the book listings. Those things are full of seeds in 17 of our 19 libraries in Pima County, Arizona. And when you check those seeds out, your only obligation is to bring back more seeds than what you checked out. And it's working, and the response from the public is incredible. They're even doing seed interlibrary loans. Okay, that's one. Second, anyone heard of Snapseed Gardens and David Simon? Oh man, this guy is just breaking open stuff. He went back to some earlier farm bills and saw that in 1972 or something, people snuck into the farm bill that low-income families can buy fruit trees, seeds, or seedlings with their SNAP cards, with their food relief cards. And so instead of just doing Band-Aid food relief to people, they can get, through the government programs or stuff, to have their own garden, orchard, or whatever. And he's institutionalizing this in one farmer's market after another all over the East. An amazing thing. My hero with Anson Mills, Glenn Roberts, down in Charleston, South Carolina area, has, with the heritage grains and legumes of the low country southeast, has, I think, 200 farmers now growing heritage grains and beans that go to about 2,000 restaurants and co-ops in the South for grits, for California gold rice, whatever. He came and showed us how he built that network in a matter of 12, 15 years. And how he does it is that every farmer that wants to scale up growing these heritage grains or legumes is given free seed, and sometimes even free seed cleaning equipment, as long as they hold back 400 to 1,000 pounds of seeds to give to the next farmer that wants to join the network. So I have 400 pounds of white Sonora wheat, the oldest wheat in the West, in my garage, waiting for the next farmer that wants to try it. And we've built the white Sonora wheat seed network up to 66 acres of production in a matter of 2 years. And every farmer, rather than hoarding seeds himself, is giving the foundation seed stock to another farmer and holding back some in case he has a drought or a flood year the next year, so that he won't have to borrow seed back. Every farmer involved in the network is putting seeds in reserve and passing it on for free to another farmer to build the network rather than thinking that we're competing. Guerrilla grafters. How many of you know about guerrilla grafters? They're not a bunch of primates that have learned from Dan Bussey in a workshop how to do bud grafting, though they should. These are people on the streets of the Bay Area in California that are going out at night with stuff from the California Rare Fruit Society or Heritage Orchards in Marin County and putting 16 to 20 heritage fruit varieties on rootstock of boring shit like Red Delicious and Jonathan's, and seeing which varieties grow in the different microclimates of San Francisco, Oakland, Albany, etc. And the city government of San Francisco made the mistake of saying in the San Francisco Chronicle, if we find any of those young women doing this, of actually messing with government property by adding fruit diversity to our parks, we'll throw them in jail. And they got 10,000 new likes on Facebook the next day. So the government response to this has basically spread the virus. Okay, and now this is happening in communities all over the country. And it's not just really edgy stuff like that. Home Orchard Society in Oregon and MAFCA and Fedco trees sometimes have 1,500 to 3,000 people coming for sign exchanges in the spring to learn how to graft, to learn how to take care of their own rootstock, and to select varieties for their. This is this incredible re-diversification of agriculture. And I could go on with examples like that. We have a nomadic nursery movement in Arizona where people literally move around. Megan Larmer is doing this with the Chicago Rare Orchard Project too, of finding abandoned spaces, setting up a nursery until that place is sold, moving all the pots and all the stuff to another building and keeping that stuff going so that urban communities are as involved in this diversification as urban communities. I want to do something rather geeky for just 3 minutes. So I'm like a data compulsive obsessive guy. You know, I like collecting stuff about what you guys have all been doing. And I just want to give you an idea of how this kind of grassroots stuff that you've all been involved in has made a difference over the last 20 years. I went back to the first fruit and nut and berry inventory, first garden seed inventory, and the first, is it Harvest Edition, where everyone's listed, Joanne or Diane, the yearbook. Okay, to see what the numbers of growers and seed companies were for some of the heirlooms on the Ark of Taste in the 1980s and what's happening with them now. So permit me to put my glasses on and get geeky for a couple minutes, okay? I just want to read you what's happened over the lifetime of this organization. Amish deer tongue lettuce. How many of you have grown that? Yeah, okay. Let's remember that in 1989, just 3 members were. There were 6 small regional seed companies. This is when a lot of those were going out, that had Amish deer tongue lettuce in the 1980s. By 1999, there were 17 seed companies handling that instead of 16. By 2004, 23. Today on localharvest.org, there are 441 commercial farms selling Amish deer tongue lettuce in CSAs and farmers markets across this country. And that's just the people that use localharvest.com to do their listings. Let's go through a couple others like that. Boston marrow squash. Anyone grown that one? I know David has. 4 growers of that in the Seed Savers membership that shared their seeds in the 80s. Again, 6 small companies. 1999, that got up to 8 companies. There's now 78 commercial farmers that's part of their living. Here's another one, fish pepper from the Baltimore, Philadelphia area. William Wise Weaver was involved in bringing that one back. No members in the 1980s. I think Weaver started sharing his seeds with people in the 90s. Only 1 seed company. By 2004, 13 seed companies because of things like the Slow Food Ark of Taste, the Renewing America's Food Traditions effort to get this in our Renewing America's Food Traditions picnics. 242 farmers market vendors across the country now selling fish peppers. Even 4 years ago when Kurt Fries and I tried to track it down, we could only find 8 commercial growers in the whole country, 242 today. Lohr's Italian garlic. How about for all you garlic heads? How many of you have done Lohr's? Pretty cool garlic. One seed company in the 1980s, 2 in the 1990s, today 10, 74 commercial farmers growing Lohr's Italian garlic and direct marketing to their community. Radiator Charlie, how many have you been in cahoots with Radiator Charlie's Mortgage Lifter Tomato? What a cool name. I mean, do we have cooler names than hip-hop bands or than TV shows? I mean, when I tell people, well, what did you spend your day doing? Well, I was out with my Radiator Charlie mortgage lifters. I mean, I just shut them down. They don't know what to say. One seed company in the 80s. No growers in the network. By the 1990s, 4. Today, 17 seed companies offering it. 301 farmers making a living off selling their mortgage lifter tomatoes to all these restaurants that are nuts about heirloom tomato salads. I got so pissed off. Last year I went to a place in Pennsylvania where I saw heirloom tomato salad on the menu, and I said to the waitress, "What kind of heirloom tomato is in the salad?" And she said, "Oh, the heirloom tomato." I think we need to do a little bit of education there. Okay, just two more. Some of the people from Wisconsin can help me with the difficult pronunciation of this one. Sheboygan? Is that right? Did I say it right? Sheboygan? Okay. Sheboygan pink tomato. No seed companies in the 80s. No members. No, one member by 1989 growing it. Only 2 seed companies now growing it, but 42 growers. This is one of these latecomers, but it shows that same trend. These things catch wind with this audience. You tell your friends, you evaluate it, you create a buzz about it, and then it starts to take off. Just going to do one more. An old one, an 1889 introduction from Johnson and Stoke Seed Company, the Sudus variant of the Brandywine tomato. There were 2 Brandywine tomato, generic Brandywine tomatoes offered in the 1980s. By 2004, we had 6 seed companies. Today, there's 278 farmers making their living by selling that to restaurants, farmers markets, and through CSAs. So this is the kind of thing that we seldom take a step back from our daily work and say, what has our collective contribution been to rediversifying the American foodscape? And you all are the incubators of every one of those stories I've just told you. It starts with gardeners like you. You may share the seeds with other members here. It may get on the listing through this organization. Ofra or Martha or other people like that may do a little thing in it on their magazine or on TV or now on other media that I don't understand. And then all of a sudden, you're seeing it in a local restaurant. It's just the most amazing phenomena. And I just want to say that this is also just as true for what our friends at the American Livestock Breeds Conservancy have done. They brought a dozen, if not 3 dozen, livestock breeds like the White Park cattle back from obscurity to being on the plates in this country. So I want to honor all of you that have been involved in that process. It's just a miracle that's happened within our own lifetimes. It's just remarkable. So thanks to all those Pittsburgh folks for their equivalent efforts in the animal world. Well, I want to leave you with just 2 little things. First, I want you to all stand up because, Mr. Professor's been talking too long and you got to get a little bit of stretch to it. But I'm going to ask you to do something weird. I'm going to ask you to renew your vows. I'm a Franciscan brother, and I've been marrying a bunch of people besides my wife. I mean, I've been marrying people to each other, not I've been marrying a bunch of people. But one of the great things that's happened at those weddings is that everyone else there who's already has a partner has been renewing their vows. And I'd like all of you to renew your vows to these seeds that you have been part of and that they've been part of your lives. So I'm going to read a line. I think you know how this works. And then you're going to read a line, okay? So the first line is one of those I, comma, and then you fill in the blanks, and I want everyone to say their own name. I, Gary Nabhan, a gardener, farmer, seed saver, and eater, wish to renew our sacred vows. To take care, love, and serve. the astonishing diversity of life on this earth. Through sickness and in health. I bet you knew that line. In times of crisis and times of joy. To sow the seeds of food justice. To sow the seeds of food security. To sow the seeds of food democracy. To sow the seeds of true food sovereignty. Through our own actions and our own eating patterns. So that we may all eat what we have truly sown. I reaffirm our covenant with this earth. To humbly be just one more way that seeds themselves regenerate into more seeds to nourish all of us. Amen. I love you all. Thank you, and God bless you. And God is with you all.